We're joined now by Josh Frydenberg, the Liberal member for Keong. Josh Frydenberg, at this stage in the campaign, especially this week, the Coalition's paid parental leave scheme has become the centre of debate. Today we've got shareholder groups complaining that the levy on these big companies, the 1.5% increase in tax, is not going to be franked, that therefore it slugs mum and dad investors. What's your response to that?
Well, what shareholders are interested in is company profitability, and certainly under a coalition government, we will be reducing company tax. Now, last time I looked, the Labor Party doesn't have any plans to reduce company tax. We'll be taking $1 billion out of red tape. We'll be abolishing the carbon tax and the mining tax, and we'll be taking the industrial relations pendulum back to the responsible centre. That's what businesses are interested in. They're the real issues that go to the heart of productivity and profitability. This debate about franking credits and the like, that's not the heart of the issue for companies and businesses at the moment. They're suffering, and is better economic management.
If that's the case, why are companies complaining about the generosity of this scheme and the tax imposed on them?
Look, there'll always be some critics of every policy, Chris, but the reality is this is a very important step forward for Australia's productivity and for Australia's workforce participation, particularly getting more women into the workforce. There'll be a huge dividend for the Australian economy as a result. Let's just look at the facts. A woman on an average full-time salary is about $65,000. Under our plan, they'll be $21,300 better off. They'll be getting superannuation under our paid parental leave scheme. We'll remove the burden from small business of having to manage this scheme by putting it through the Family Assistance Office. A woman's going to get half a year, 26 weeks, to bond with their child, which is the recommendation from the World Health Organization. And, women will be getting a paid parental leave scheme, which is at a replacement wage, not at a minimum wage. And you look internationally, Chris, more than 30 OECD countries, only 2 of them have a paid parental leave scheme which is not at replacement wage. So we don't want Australia to be isolated like that anymore. We want to have a fair income scheme, and I think it's going to be a big dividend for the Australian economy.
Do you acknowledge, though, at least at this point in the campaign and with the debate on tonight, that the Coalition is exposed on this scheme because so far you've not been able to spell out how it will be paid for?
Well, it's fully costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office and will be fully funded. And we have outlined a number of savings already. I mean, take the paid parental leave scheme. There'll be a saving involved in closing down the government scheme. Currently, federal public servants are able to double dip, both with the federal scheme that they can get under their own public service provisions, but also with the government's minimum wage PPL, and we'll avoid that double dipping. And then we're going to have a temporary levy on around 3,200 companies of 1.5%, and that's less than 1 in 200 companies. Now, given that we have a company tax cut in place of 1.5%, that will net out that temporary levy on big business to pay for the paid parental leave scheme. So I think it's a good scheme, I think it's a good policy, and I think that we're absolutely committed to it.
But it won't net out if franking imputation credits aren't granted to the people who own those companies, the shareholders.
No, but it will net out because there's a 1.5% company tax cut coming in from July 1, 2015, and then there's also this paid parental leave temporary levy on 3,200 businesses at 1.5%. Net.
You say it will net out, but the imputation credit for the shareholders will be 28.5%, but the amount of tax paid will be 30%.
But it's in terms of what is going to be good for those companies, and what is going to be good for those companies is the dividend for the Australian economy, Chris, from getting more women into the workforce, for boosting productivity. We're all going to be winners from this scheme, and particularly small business is going to be a big winner because they're not necessarily going to be paying this temporary levy, but also they're not going to have to administer the program because it's going to be done through the Family Assistance Office. I mean, I go back to the rationale for this program in the first place, namely to boost productivity and to boost female workforce participation. You see, if you look at the number of women in the Australian workforce, about 67%. If you look at the number of men, about 78%. The Grattan Institute pointed out that of those women in the workforce, only 55% of them are working full-time compared to 85% of men, Chris. And so there are these huge gaps, and so many women have gone through lots of education and are ready to enter the workforce, but for one reason or another don't. And what we want to do through this policy is help facilitate more women to enter the workforce and produce a bigger economic dividend for the country.
Josh, you say everyone will be a winner from this scheme. Some of the state premiers, including from coalition states, have expressed concern that they won't be better off, and indeed they'll be worse off. Can you guarantee here and now that the state governments won't be worse off, that they won't have to put extra money into this scheme?
Yes, states won't be worse off. That is what we are saying under our scheme, and I noticed a number of state premiers have come out strongly in support of the scheme, Chris.
Okay, if I can turn to another issue, Josh, that of asylum seekers. The Immigration Minister, Tony Burke, is now claiming that the so-called PNG solution is starting to work, that a number of asylum seekers, an increasing number, particularly Iranians in Indonesia and PNG, are asking to be returned home. Do you believe that that's the case, that the PNG solution is showing signs of working?
Absolutely not. The PNG solution, so-called solution, is unravelling, Chris. Let's go through the facts. Since announcing the PNG proposal, around 3,000 people have come to Australia in an unauthorised manner by boat. Manus Island only has capacity for a few hundred, and it's not going to be in the foreseeable future that the capacity will lift to 3,000. Secondly, you had the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, Peter O'Neill, coming out publicly and contradicting Kevin Rudd directly by saying not all people who are deemed to be refugees will be settled in Papua New Guinea. Indeed, they could end up in places like Australia. And third, the regional negotiations that are going on at the moment do not include a representative from Iran. And the largest number of people coming to Australia by boat are from Iran at present. So to not have the Iranians sit at the table and discuss how they can reduce the number of people from their own country making their way to Indonesia before they make their way to Australia is, something that the government must explain. So I actually think the PNG so-called solution is unravelling before the Australian people's eyes. They know this government doesn't have its heart in it. They know this government doesn't have a capacity to change the dynamic in this situation. Only the coalition can do that.
So if the PNG solution is unravelling, if it's a failure, then I assume the coalition will abandon it should you win government.
Now, what Scott Morrison has made very clear, Chris, is that we'll salvage whatever we can out of the PNG solution. I mean, what we will not do is
from what you're saying, there isn't much that is salvageable.
Well, offshore processing is one element of it, and we came up with the idea of Manus Island, so we strongly support offshore processing in PNG. But what we say is you need a series of other measures that involve the temporary protection visas, that involve turning back the boats when it's safe to do so. But we're not going to do what Kevin Rudd has done, which is come up with a last-minute pre-election fix and say to the Australian people, all said, all done, the problem's solved. It's not solved. It's a very tough problem, and the pre-election fix, which was the PNG so-called solution, is unravelling before our eyes.
Okay, Josh, the second leaders' debate will be held in Brisbane this evening. How important do you think it is as far as the campaign goes, and where do you see the pivotal points being?
Well, I think it's a moment of truth for Kevin Rudd because he produced a very lacklustre performance in the first debate. In fact, he broke the rules by reading from his notes. And we know that he's been drawing in ALP members for photo shoots at bowls clubs around the country because he doesn't want to front the people. This is Tony Abbott's idea to have a people's forum, and Kevin Rudd's been dragged kicking and screaming to it. So it's an important forum. The pressure will be on Kevin Rudd to explain why he's overseen so many failures over the last few years, to give his narrative for the country going forward, to explain why the economic situation has deteriorated, why unemployment is scheduled to hit 6.25% by 2014, why the budget position has deteriorated by $33 billion in a space of a dozen weeks. Why does he keep hitting small businesses and the Australian public with more taxes, namely the FBT on cars and the tax on cigarettes and so forth? They're the issues that will be at the heart of tonight's debate, and as you say, the border protection issue, because the boats haven't stopped coming and the PNG solution has unravelled before our eyes.